Aurelia Whitmore's hands trembled as she stared at the eviction notice taped to her grandmother's hospital room door. 3 days. That's all the time she had left before they would disconnect the life support keeping Nana alive. Miss Whitmore. A woman's voice cut through her panic. Aurelia turned to find an elegantly dressed woman in her 50s, silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, designer heels clicking against the sterile hospital floor. Everything about her screamed money and power. I'm Victoria Blackthorne from Meridian Events. I believe we spoke on the phone about a position. Aurelia's heart skipped. She'd applied to dozens of event planning companies in the past week, desperate for anything that paid enough to cover the mounting medical bills. She didn't remember this particular conversation, but desperation had a way of blurring details. Yes, of course. Thank you for coming all this way. Victoria's smile was calculated, predatory. I have a unique opportunity that requires someone with your particular background. Religious upbringing, clean record, no romantic entanglements. My research was quite thorough. The words sent a chill down Aurelia's spine, but the woman continued before she could respond. One event. One night. $25,000. Aurelia's knees nearly buckled. That amount would cover 2 months of Nana's treatment, maybe 3 if she stretched it. What kind of event requires that much money for one night? A private dinner party for one of our most exclusive clients. Very particular about his privacy, very generous with his compensation. You would be responsible for every detail, catering, ambience, service. Think of it as a luxury dining experience for one very important man. Victoria pulled out a tablet, showing Aurelia photos of previous events. Elegant table settings, crystal stemware, candlelit atmospheres that belonged in magazines rather than real life. The client has specific requirements. No married women, no one with children, no one with complicated personal lives. He values discretion above all else. Something felt wrong about this entire situation, but as Aurelia glanced back at her grandmother's room, at the machines keeping her alive, wrong felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. I don't have experience with events of this caliber. Experience isn't what he's looking for. Authenticity is. He's tired of the artificial women who usually handle these arrangements. He wants someone genuine, someone pure. The way Victoria said the word pure made Aurelia's skin crawl, but $25,000 was $25,000. When would this take place? Tomorrow evening. I know it's short notice, but that's why the compensation is so generous. He's flying in from New York specifically for this dinner. Everything will be provided: location, food, supplies. You simply need to execute the vision. Victoria handed her a business card with an address embossed in gold lettering. The penthouse suite at the Grandview Hotel. 7 p.m. sharp. Or something elegant but not provocative. Think sophisticated innocence. Aurelia's stomach churned at the phrasing, but she thought of Nana hooked up to those machines, of the eviction notice, of the mounting pile of bills that kept growing faster than she could ever hope to pay them. I'll need half the payment up front. Victoria's smile widened, like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. She pulled out an envelope from her purse, thick with cash. $12,500. The rest when the evening concludes successfully. Aurelia stared at more money than she'd ever held in her hands. Her entire college fund hadn't been this much. What exactly does successfully mean? That our client is satisfied with the experience you provide. Nothing more, nothing less. There was something in Victoria's tone that suggested layers of meaning Aurelia wasn't grasping, but desperation had a way of silencing intuition. She took the envelope, feeling the weight of her grandmother's life in her hands. I'll be there. Excellent. One more thing, absolute confidentiality. This client values his privacy more than anything else in the world. What happens tomorrow night stays between you, me, and him. Are we clear? Aurelia nodded, though every instinct screamed that she was walking into something far more complicated than a simple dinner party. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Aurelia? Don't let his reputation intimidate you. Caspian Blackthorne may seem cold, but he's just a man who's forgotten how to trust. Perhaps you'll remind him. Before Aurelia could ask what she meant, Victoria was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the weight of a decision that would change everything. The Grandview Hotel's penthouse elevator climbed silently toward the 42nd floor, each passing second amplifying the knots in Aurelia's stomach. She'd spent the entire day shopping with Victoria's advance payment, choosing a simple black dress that struck the balance between elegant and modest. Now, standing in the mirrored elevator with catering supplies and floral arrangements, she questioned every decision that had led her here. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sprawling penthouse that belonged in architectural magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering Portland skyline, while modern furniture in blacks and grays created an atmosphere of expensive minimalism. Everything was exactly as Victoria had promised, down to the dining table already set with crystal and china. Aurelia checked her watch. 6:30. She had 30 minutes to transform the space into whatever vision Victoria had in mind. She began lighting candles, adjusting flowers, setting out the catered meal that had been delivered precisely at 6. At exactly 7 o'clock, she heard the private elevator ascending. The man who stepped out was nothing like what she'd expected. Caspian Blackthorne was younger than she'd imagined, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and steel-gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room before settling on her. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her car, but it was his presence that filled the space, commanding and slightly dangerous. "You're not what I ordered," he said, his voice carrying a slight confusion. Heat flooded Aurelia's cheeks. "I'm sorry, I'm Aurelia Whitmore from Meridian Events. I was hired to organize your dinner this evening." Caspian's eyes narrowed, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. Meridian Events. Something in his tone suggested recognition, but not the pleasant kind. "Is there a problem? I can call Ms. Blackthorne if there's been some mistake." "Victoria sent you." It wasn't a question. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, something that looked like regret flickered across his features. "Of course she did." He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey. "How much is she paying you?" The question caught Aurelia off guard. "I'm sorry. For tonight. Whatever arrangement you have with my aunt, I'll double it if you leave now." Aurelia's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of complication she couldn't afford. "Mr. Blackthorne, I'm here to provide a professional service. If there's something wrong with the setup, I can fix it." He turned to face her fully, and she saw something she hadn't expected in his eyes: concern. Not for himself, but for her. "You have no idea what you've walked into, do you? I'm here to serve dinner and ensure you have a pleasant evening. That's all. That's all," he repeated, taking a long sip of his whiskey. Victoria's games are getting more elaborate. Before Aurelia could ask what he meant, he was crossing the room toward her, moving with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. He stopped just close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her pulse quicken despite her nervousness. "What did she tell you about me?" "Nothing specific. Just that you valued privacy and discretion." "Privacy?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what we're calling it?" Aurelia took a step back, but found herself against the dining table with nowhere to go. "Mr. Blackthorne, if you're not satisfied with the arrangements, I can leave and refund your payment." "Can you?" His hand reached out, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Even if it means your grandmother dies?" The words hit her like a physical blow. "How do you know about my grandmother?" "Because Victoria knows everything about everyone she uses. She researched you, found your pressure points, and delivered you here like a gift-wrapped present." Aurelia's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. "I don't understand." "Neither did I, until about 5 minutes ago." He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Victoria doesn't do anything without a reason. Sending you here, someone like you, it's another move in whatever game she's playing." "Someone like me?" His eyes swept over her face, and for a moment, his expression softened. "Innocent. Pure. Everything I've spent years avoiding." The admission hung between them, charged with implications Aurelia wasn't sure she wanted to understand. "The dinner's getting cold," she said weakly. "Forget the dinner." He moved closer again, and this time when his hand came up, it cupped her face with surprising gentleness. "Victoria sent you here knowing exactly what would happen. The question is whether you're a willing participant or another one of her victims." Aurelia's breath caught. Standing this close to him, feeling the warmth of his touch, she understood that whatever was happening between them had nothing to do with dinner parties or professional services. "I needed the money," she whispered. "And now?" She looked into his eyes and saw something that matched the sudden hunger building inside her. something that had nothing to do with Victoria's schemes and everything to do with the magnetic pull she felt toward this dangerous, damaged man. Now I don't know what I need. Caspian's office on the 38th floor of Blackthorn Industries commanded a view of Manhattan that most people only saw in movies. But this morning, he wasn't admiring the skyline. He was staring at the photographs scattered across his mahogany desk, each one a perfect capture of moments from 3 nights ago that should have remained private. The images showed him and Aurelia in the penthouse, her innocent face tilted up toward his hands tangled in her hair, their bodies pressed together in ways that told a story he'd never intended to share with anyone, especially not his aunt. Satisfied with your evening? Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts as she settled into the chair across from his desk without invitation. Caspian gathered the photos, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. What do you want, Victoria? The same thing I've always wanted. What's best for this family? She crossed her legs elegantly, every inch the composed businesswoman. Though I must say, your taste in companions has improved dramatically. She was hired to organize a dinner. Nothing more. Victoria's laugh was cold, calculating. Is that what we're calling it? Because these photographs suggest your definition of dinner service is rather creative. Heat flooded Caspian's face, but he kept his voice level. You had us followed. I had my investment protected. Do you have any idea what the board would say if these photos found their way to the financial press? The CEO of Blackthorn Industries, known for his iron control and business acumen, reduced to seducing innocent girls hired to serve his dinner. She's not a girl. She's a woman who needed money for her dying grandmother. Oh, I know exactly who Aurelia Whitmore is. Sweet, naive, raised in a religious household, never been with a man before you got your hands on her. Victoria leaned forward, her smile sharp as a blade. The perfect victim for a man with your reputation. Caspian's hands clenched into fists on his desk. What do you want? Transfer controlling interest of Blackthorn Industries to me. Sign the papers, and these photos disappear forever. Refuse, and they'll be on the front page of every business publication in the country by tomorrow morning. You're bluffing. Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be email drafts. Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes. I've already written the story. Blackthorn CEO exploits vulnerable woman. It has such a nice ring to it, don't you think? The blood drained from Caspian's face. Not for himself, but for Aurelia. She'd been through enough without having her private moments splashed across every newspaper in America. She did nothing wrong. Of course she didn't. But will anyone believe that when they see these photos? A desperate girl who needed money. A powerful man who took advantage of her situation. The narrative writes itself. Caspian stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the city moved at its relentless pace, unaware that his world was crumbling 40 floors above the street. Why now? You've been trying to get control of this company for years. Because now I have leverage. Serafina always said you were too soft, too emotional. She was right. The mention of his twin sister's name was like a knife to his chest. Serafina had died in a car accident 2 years ago, but Victoria had a way of invoking her memory whenever she needed to twist the knife deeper. Serafina has nothing to do with this, doesn't she? She understood what this family requires. Strength, ruthlessness, the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect our interests. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. You've always been the weak link, Caspian. Too concerned with doing the right thing instead of doing what's necessary. And what's necessary according to you? Destroying an innocent woman's life? Protecting the family legacy. Something Serafina died trying to do. Caspian whirled around, his control finally snapping. Serafina died because she was driving too fast on a wet road. It was an accident. Was it? Victoria's smile was enigmatic, dangerous. Sometimes I wonder. Before Caspian could ask what she meant, Victoria was moving toward the door. You have 24 hours to decide. The company or the girl's reputation. Choose wisely. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Caspian alone with the photographs and a growing certainty that his aunt's games were far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to Aurelia's number, then stopped. What could he say? That he'd dragged her into a war she never asked to fight? That their night together, which had felt like the first genuine connection he'd experienced in years, was now being used as a weapon against them both? He set the phone down and stared out at the city again. Somewhere out there, Aurelia was probably caring for her grandmother, unaware that photographs of their most intimate moments were being used to destroy both their lives. For the first time in his adult life, Caspian Blackthorne felt truly powerless, and he was beginning to suspect that Victoria's games went deeper than corporate control. Much deeper. The hospice room smelled of antiseptic and impending death. Aurelia sat beside her grandmother's bed, watching the rise and fall of frail shoulders beneath thin blankets. Nana had been unconscious for 2 days now, but the doctors said she might still be able to hear. "I don't know what to do," Aurelia whispered, her voice barely audible over the steady beep of monitors. "I met someone, and I think I'm falling for him, but something feels wrong about how we met." Her grandmother's eyes fluttered open, startling Aurelia from her confession. "Nana." "Aurelia." The voice was paper-thin, barely a whisper. "There's something you need to know." Aurelia leaned closer, gripping her grandmother's hand. "Don't try to talk. Save your strength." No time left. Nana's fingers tightened with surprising strength. "In my jewelry box, there's a letter. From your mother. She wasn't who you think she was." "Nana, you're confused. Mom died when I was 5. You raised me." "Elena." Your mother's name wasn't Elena Whitmore. Each word seemed to cost her grandmother tremendous effort. It was Elena Ravencrest. She changed her name when she ran away. Aurelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Ran away from what? From them. From the family that stole everything from us. Nana's breathing became labored. "The Blackthorns. They murdered your grandfather, stole our fortune, destroyed our family name." The name hit Aurelia like a physical blow. "Blackthorne. Caspian Blackthorne. That's impossible. You're mistaken. 25 years ago, we were the Ravencrests. Oil, steel, railroads. We had everything." Nana's eyes fixed on Aurelia's face with burning intensity, until Richard Blackthorne decided he wanted it all for himself. Aurelia's mind reeled. The man she'd spent 3 nights thinking about, the man whose touch had awakened something she didn't know existed inside her, belonged to the family that had destroyed hers. "The letter, it explains everything. Your mother, she was pregnant with you when she discovered what they'd done. She ran to protect you. Nana, please, you need to rest. Promise me." Nana's grip tightened desperately. "Promise me you'll read the letter. Promise me you'll make them pay for what they did to our family." Aurelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise." Her grandmother's eyes closed, and within minutes, the steady beep of the monitor became a long, unbroken tone. 2 hours later, Aurelia stood in her grandmother's small apartment, holding a yellowed envelope with her name written in her mother's careful handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it, revealing pages of delicate script that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her life. "My dearest Aurelia," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the truth can finally come to light. My real name is Elena Ravencrest, and you are the rightful heir to one of the largest fortunes in American history." Aurelia sank into her grandmother's old armchair, her legs unable to support her as she continued reading. "Your grandfather, Thomas Ravencrest, built an empire from nothing. Oil wells in Texas, steel mills in Pennsylvania, railroads that connected the country. But Richard Blackthorne coveted what we had. He came to our family as a friend, a potential business partner. Instead, he destroyed us from within." The letter detailed a conspiracy that spanned decades. Forged documents, bribed officials, manufactured scandals that destroyed the Ravencrest reputation. Thomas Ravencrest had died in what appeared to be a hunting accident, but Elena had discovered evidence that it was murder. "I was pregnant with you when I found Richard's plans to eliminate our entire bloodline. I took what evidence I could and ran, changing my name, disappearing into obscurity to keep you safe. But someday, someone will have to reclaim what was stolen. Someone will have to make them pay." Aurelia's vision blurred as she read the final paragraphs. "I've hidden documents in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is taped under the bottom drawer of my jewelry box. But be careful, my darling. The Blackthorns are more dangerous than you can imagine. They killed your grandfather, and they'll kill you too if they discover who you really are." The letter was signed, "All my love, Elena Ravencrest Whitmore." Aurelia set the pages down with trembling hands. Everything made sense now. Victoria's sudden job offer, the way she'd known about her grandmother's condition, the too convenient timing of it all. She hadn't been hired to organize a dinner party. She'd been delivered to Caspian Blackthorne like a lamb to slaughter. But what was their endgame? Did Caspian know who she really was? Was their night together part of some larger plan to destroy the last of the Ravencrest line? She thought about the way he'd looked at her, the gentleness in his touch, the conflict she'd seen in his eyes when he'd warned her about Victoria's games. Either he was the most talented actor she'd ever met, or he was as much a victim of his family's schemes as she was. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Your life is in danger." See, Aurelia stared at the message, her mother's warnings echoing in her mind. The smart thing would be to disappear, to take what evidence she had and run just like her mother had 25 years ago. But her grandmother's dying words burned in her memory. "Make them pay for what they did to our family." She typed back, "Where?" The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Portland felt like the setting for every thriller movie Aurelia had ever watched. She pulled her car into the empty lot, gravel crunching under her tires as she spotted Caspian's black Mercedes already parked near the loading dock. Her mother's letter was folded in her purse, along with the safety deposit box key she'd found exactly where Elena had said it would be. Caspian emerged from the shadows as she approached, his usual perfect composure replaced by something that looked like desperation. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept as little as she had since her grandmother's death. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You said my life was in danger. From your family, I assume." She kept her distance, studying his face for any sign of deception. "Though I'm starting to wonder if the danger comes from you." "What's that supposed to mean?" Aurelia pulled out her mother's letter, watching his expression carefully. "It means I know who I really am, Caspian, and I know what your family did to mine." The color drained from his face as he read the name on the envelope. "Ravencrest. 25 years ago, your family murdered my grandfather and stole everything that belonged to us. My mother ran to protect me, but now she's dead, my grandmother's dead, and somehow I've ended up right back where this all started." Caspian ran both hands through his hair, pacing away from her. "This is why Victoria sent you to me. She knew exactly who you were." "Did you know?" "No." He turned back to face her, his gray eyes intense with sincerity. "I swear to you, Aurelia, I had no idea who you were when we met. I thought you were just another one of Victoria's games, but not this." "Another one of her games?" The phrase sent ice through her veins. "How many women has she used against you?" "It's not like that. Victoria's been trying to get control of Blackthorne Industries for years. She uses whatever leverage she can find." He pulled out his phone, showing her the photographs Victoria had used to blackmail him. "She had us followed that night. She's threatening to release these unless I sign the company over to her." Aurelia stared at the images of their most intimate moments, feeling violated and used. "So our night together, what I felt, what you made me feel, it was all just ammunition for her war games." "No." Caspian stepped closer, his voice urgent. "What happened between us was real. It was the first real thing I've felt in years. But Victoria twisted it into something ugly, something she could use. Just like she's using my real identity." Aurelia folded the letter, her mind racing. "She knows I'm the last of the Ravencrests. She probably thinks I'm here to reclaim what was stolen from my family." "Are you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications that could destroy whatever fragile connection still existed between them. "I don't know," Aurelia admitted. 3 days ago, I thought I was just a poor girl trying to keep her grandmother alive. Now I find out I'm the heir to a fortune that was built on blood and theft. Your family's blood and theft. My father wasn't the man who killed your grandfather, but he inherited everything that was stolen, and he passed it down to you." She looked at him, this man who had touched her soul in ways she was still trying to understand. "How do I separate what I feel for you from what your family took from mine?" Caspian moved closer, close enough that she could see the pain in his eyes. "The same way I separate what I feel for you from the fact that my aunt orchestrated our meeting to destroy us both." "What do you mean, destroy us both?" "Victoria didn't just want to blackmail me with those photos. She wanted to eliminate any threat to her control of the family empire. If you're really the last Ravencrest, you represent a legal claim to assets worth billions of dollars." The implications hit Aurelia like a sledgehammer. "She's planning to kill me. I think she's planning to kill us both. Make it look like a murder-suicide, maybe. The guilt-ridden CEO who killed the woman he'd wronged, then took his own life. It would be tragic, romantic even. and it would leave Victoria as the sole heir to everything. Aurelia's knees went weak. She'd walked into something far more dangerous than a simple revenge plot. We have to go to the police. With what evidence? A 25-year-old letter and some photographs? Victoria spent decades covering her tracks. Caspian caught her arms as she swayed. But there might be another way. What do you mean? You said your mother hid documents. If we can find proof of what really happened to your grandfather, evidence that the theft was murder, we might be able to expose Victoria and reclaim what's rightfully yours. Aurelia looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of manipulation. All she saw was a man as trapped as she was, fighting against forces that had been set in motion long before either of them was born. Why would you help me? If I reclaimed a Ravencrest fortune, your family loses everything. Because what we built our empire on was blood money. Because my aunt is a killer who's been pulling strings for decades. And because he cupped her face in his hands, the same gesture that had undone her 3 nights ago. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I can't let her destroy you the way she destroyed my sister. Your sister? His face went dark. Serafina died in a car accident 2 years ago. But right before she died, she'd been asking questions about the family business, digging into old records. Now I'm wondering if that accident was really an accident at all. The First National Bank safety deposit box vault felt like a tomb, all marble and hushed reverence for the secrets people buried in small metal boxes. Aurelia's hands shook as she inserted the key her mother had hidden for over 2 decades, the mechanism clicking open to reveal a treasure trove of documents that would rewrite history. Caspian stood beside her, his presence both comforting and complicated as she lifted out manila folders thick with papers, photographs, and what appeared to be audio cassette tapes from the 1990s. The top folder was labeled Thomas Ravencrest, Murder Evidence, in her mother's careful handwriting. We should take everything back to my apartment, Aurelia whispered, conscious of the bank security cameras recording their every move. If Victoria has people watching us, we can't analyze this here. 2 hours later, they sat on Aurelia's living room floor, surrounded by 25 years of carefully preserved evidence. The documents painted a picture of systematic destruction orchestrated by Richard Blackthorne with surgical precision. Forged contracts transferring Ravencrest assets to Blackthorne Industries. Correspondence between Richard and various officials who had been bought or blackmailed into cooperation. Bank records showing massive payments to judges, senators, and law enforcement officers. But it was the photographs that made Aurelia's blood run cold. That's my grandfather, she said, pointing to a distinguished man in his 50s standing beside what appeared to be an oil derrick. And that's your father next to him. Caspian studied the image, his jaw tightening. They look like friends in this photo. That's what makes it so horrible. Your father befriended him, gained his trust, then destroyed him from the inside. Aurelia flipped through more photographs, showing the 2 men at dinner parties, business meetings, even what appeared to be a family barbecue. My mother documented everything. She knew what was coming. The audio tapes were even more damning. Elena Ravencrest had secretly recorded conversations between Richard Blackthorne and his associates, planning not just the financial destruction of the Ravencrest family, but the physical elimination of anyone who might pose a threat to their plans. Caspian's face went ashen as they listened to his father's voice discussing permanent solutions to the Ravencrest problem. I need some air, he said, standing abruptly and walking to the window. Aurelia continued reading through the documents, her anger building with each page. The Ravencrests hadn't just been wealthy. They'd been philanthropists, funding schools and hospitals across the country. Her grandfather had been working on a foundation to provide free health care to impoverished communities when Richard Blackthorne decided he wanted the Ravencrest oil reserves for himself. There's something else here, she called to Caspian, holding up a folder marked Insurance Policies, Current Threats. He returned to sit beside her as she opened the folder, revealing documents that made their current situation terrifyingly clear. Your mother was still gathering intelligence even after she ran away, Caspian said, reading over her shoulder. These are reports from private investigators she hired to monitor the Blackthorne family. The reports detailed Richard Blackthorne's death from a heart attack in 2010, leaving the empire to his twin children, Caspian and Serafina. But they also revealed something else. Serafina had been asking questions about the family's origins, requesting access to old financial records, and meeting with lawyers about potential civil rights violations. She was investigating you, Aurelia realized. Your sister was trying to uncover the truth about how your family built their fortune. Caspian's hands clenched into fists. Victoria kept mentioning Serafina's death, saying she died trying to protect the family legacy. I thought she meant Serafina was defending our reputation, but she meant Serafina was getting too close to the truth about what your family had done. Aurelia flipped to the final page in the folder, a newspaper clipping about Serafina Blackthorn's fatal car accident. Look at the date. 3 days after this report shows her meeting with a lawyer who specialized in recovering stolen assets. The newspaper article described how Serafina had lost control of her car on a rain-slicked mountain road, crashing through a guardrail and plunging into a ravine. No other vehicles were involved, no witnesses, just a tragic accident that claimed the life of one of New York's most promising young executives. Victoria killed her, Caspian said, his voice hollow with realization. My own aunt murdered my sister to keep her from exposing what our family had done. Aurelia found his hand, squeezing it gently. I'm sorry. I know how much she meant to you. Serafina was the only family I had left that I could trust. She was brilliant, principled, everything I tried to be but never quite achieved. His voice broke slightly. And Victoria took her away from me just like she took everything away from your family. They sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Finally, Aurelia spoke. There's enough evidence here to destroy Victoria and reclaim the Ravencrest assets. But we need to be smart about how we use it. If she killed your sister to protect these secrets, she won't hesitate to kill us. We need copies of everything, stored in multiple locations. And we need witnesses, people who can verify that we had this information before anything happens to us. Aurelia nodded, then hesitated. Caspian, there's something I need to ask you. When this is all over, when Victoria is exposed and the truth comes out, what happens to us? He looked at her, his gray eyes intense with emotion. What do you mean? I mean that if I reclaim the Ravencrest fortune, I'll be worth billions of dollars. And you'll lose everything your family built, even if it was built on blood money. How do we build a relationship on that foundation? Caspian was quiet for a long moment, considering her question. I've been thinking about that since we found your mother's letter. And I realized something. I don't want money that came from murdering innocent people. I don't want to be part of a legacy built on theft and violence. But it's all you've ever known. No, he said, turning to face her fully. 3 nights ago, I learned what it felt like to connect with someone real, someone who wasn't interested in my money or my power or what I could do for them. For the first time in my life, I felt like I might actually deserve something good. Aurelia felt tears stinging her eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that when this is over, I want to help you rebuild the Ravencrest legacy the right way. Your grandfather's foundation, the hospitals, the schools. We could finish what he started. We could turn something horrible into something beautiful. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. The number was blocked, but the message made her blood freeze. I know what you found. You have 24 hours to bring me every document, every recording, every piece of evidence, or you'll both join Serafina in an early grave. Come alone to the Blackthorn Industries building tomorrow at midnight. Top floor. Don't disappoint me. V. Caspian read the message over her shoulder, his face hardening with determination. She's getting desperate. That means we're close to exposing her. It also means she's ready to kill us both. Aurelia looked at the evidence scattered around her living room. 25 years of her mother's careful planning reduced to a pile of papers that might get them murdered. Maybe we should just run. Take this evidence to the FBI and disappear until it's safe. And let Victoria destroy more innocent people? Let my sister's death go unavenged? Caspian shook his head. No, it's time to end this, once and for all. Aurelia studied his face, seeing the same determination that had probably driven her grandfather to build an empire, and her mother to sacrifice everything to protect her daughter. What do you have in mind? Victoria wants to play games? Let's give her a game she'll never forget. As they began planning their response to Victoria's ultimatum, neither of them noticed the small device hidden behind Aurelia's bookshelf, silently transmitting their every word to someone who had been watching them far longer than they realized. The Blackthorn Industries building stood like a monolith against the Manhattan skyline, its 42 floors of steel and glass reflecting the city lights in a way that made it seem both beautiful and menacing. Aurelia stood on the sidewalk across the street, watching the sparse late-night traffic, her heart hammering against her ribs as she checked her watch. 11:30 p.m. In 30 minutes, she was supposed to walk into that building alone, surrender all the evidence they'd gathered, and trust that Victoria Blackthorn would simply let her walk away. The plan was suicide, but it was also the only way to draw Victoria into the open where they could expose her crimes to the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Caspian. FBI team in position. Cameras are rolling. Remember, get her to confess everything. We only get one shot at this. Aurelia typed back. If something goes wrong, make sure the world knows the truth about what happened to my family. She crossed the street, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached the building's main entrance. The security guard at the front desk looked up as she entered, his expression suggesting he'd been expecting her. Miss Whitmore, Mrs. Blackthorn is waiting for you on the 42nd floor. The elevator's been programmed to take you directly there. The ride to the top felt like ascending to her own execution. When the doors opened, she found herself in Victoria's private office, a space that radiated power and money from every carefully chosen detail. Victoria stood with her back to the elevator, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city below. You're punctual. I appreciate that in people who are about to die. Victoria turned, and Aurelia was struck by how different she looked from the composed businesswoman who had approached her at the hospital. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup slightly smeared, and there was something wild in her eyes that spoke of desperation masked as control. Where are the documents? Victoria demanded. Aurelia held up a manila envelope, the same type her mother had used to preserve 25 years of evidence. Everything's here. The recordings, the photographs, the financial records. All of it. Including the evidence about Serafina's death? The question confirmed what Aurelia had suspected. Victoria knew they'd uncovered the truth about Caspian's sister. Yes, all of it. Victoria moved closer, her hand extended for the envelope. You have no idea how much trouble you've caused me, Miss Ravencrest. Or should I say, Miss Whitmore? Your mother was very clever, hiding you in plain sight for all these years. She was protecting me from a murderer. She was protecting a fortune that never belonged to your family in the first place. Victoria's voice carried the conviction of someone who had spent decades justifying her actions. Your grandfather was weak, idealistic. He would have given away everything our families had worked to build. So you killed him. I did what was necessary to preserve the legacy. Victoria took the envelope, but didn't step back. Instead, she moved even closer, close enough that Aurelia could see the madness lurking behind her perfectly applied facade. Just like I did what was necessary when Serafina started asking inconvenient questions. Aurelia's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to keep talking. Somewhere in this building, FBI agents were recording every word. You murdered your own niece. I eliminated a threat to family stability. Serafina was always too much like her father, soft, sentimental, concerned with right and wrong instead of survival and power. Victoria began opening the envelope, pulling out the documents inside. She actually thought she could expose our family's business practices and somehow maintain our position in society. Naive child. How did you do it? How did you make her death look like an accident? Victoria laughed, a sound that sent ice through Aurelia's veins. You really think I'm going to confess everything just because you asked nicely? I may be desperate, my dear, but I'm not stupid. Something in her tone made Aurelia realize they'd made a crucial miscalculation. Victoria wasn't going to confess because she wasn't planning to let Aurelia leave this building alive. The envelope in Victoria's hands was empty. They'd filled it with blank papers and copies of meaningless documents. The real evidence was safely stored with the FBI team waiting outside. But Victoria didn't know that yet. You're right, Aurelia said, backing toward the elevator. You're not stupid, but you are desperate enough to kill your own family members to protect secrets that don't even matter anymore. Don't matter? Victoria's voice rose to a near shriek. Everything I've done has been to protect this family's position, to ensure that the Blackthorn name maintains its power and influence. Your grandfather's bleeding heart philanthropy would have destroyed us within a generation. So you destroyed his family instead. I saved our family. Victoria pulled a gun from her desk drawer, pointing it directly at Aurelia's chest. Just like I'm going to save it now by eliminating the last threat to our legacy. The elevator doors had closed behind Aurelia when she'd entered, but now they opened again with a soft ding. Caspian stepped out, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, but his eyes blazing with fury. "Hello, Aunt Victoria. Planning another family funeral?" Victoria spun toward him, the gun now trained on her nephew. "Caspian, I should have known you wouldn't let her come alone. Just like I should have known you killed Serafina." His voice was deadly calm, but Aurelia could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. "My own sister, and you murdered her like she was nothing. She was going to destroy everything we'd built. She found documents linking our fortune to the Ravencrest theft, and she was planning to give it all back. Every cent we'd earned, every investment we'd made, every business we'd acquired. She wanted to hand it over to charity in some misguided attempt at justice." "It wasn't misguided. It was right." "Right." Victoria's laughter was bitter, unhinged. "Right doesn't pay for mansions in the Hamptons, Caspian. Right doesn't maintain our social position or our political influence. Right is a luxury we can't afford. So you killed her." "I arranged for her car's brake lines to be cut before she drove up to the cabin that weekend. A simple mechanical failure on a dangerous mountain road. These things happen." Aurelia felt sick as Victoria casually described orchestrating her niece's murder. But she also felt a surge of relief. The woman was confessing everything, just not to the person they'd expected. "And now you're planning to kill us too," Caspian said. "Murder-suicide." The guilt-ridden CEO, driven mad by his forbidden love for the descendant of his family's victims, kills her and then himself. It's almost Shakespearean in its tragedy. Victoria's smile was cold, calculating. "The media will eat it up. Poor Caspian, destroyed by the weight of his family's sins." "There's just one problem with your plan," Aurelia said, finding her voice again. "We're not the only ones who know the truth." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "We gave copies of everything to the FBI before we came here tonight. Audio recordings of your father confessing to murder, photographs proving the theft of Ravencrest assets, financial records showing decades of bribery and corruption. Even if you kill us, the truth will still come out." For the first time since they'd entered the office, Victoria looked genuinely shaken. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Aurelia pulled out her phone, showing Victoria the active call that had been recording their conversation for the past 10 minutes. "Say hello to Special Agent Morrison, Victoria. He's been listening to every word." Victoria's face went white, then red with rage. "You little bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've done exactly what my mother and your niece died trying to do. I've exposed the truth about what your family really is." The sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell, followed by shouted commands as FBI agents stormed the floor. Victoria looked around desperately, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "It's over, Victoria," Caspian said gently. "Put the gun down." "No." Victoria's voice was quiet now, eerily calm. "I've spent my entire life building and protecting this empire. I won't live to see it destroyed." Before either Aurelia or Caspian could react, Victoria turned the gun on herself. The shot echoed through the office like a thunderclap, and Victoria Blackthorne crumpled to the floor behind her desk, her blood staining the pristine white carpet. FBI agents flooded into the room, securing the scene and checking for additional threats. Aurelia found herself in Caspian's arms, both of them shaking as the adrenaline began to wear off and the reality of what they'd just witnessed sank in. "It's over," Caspian whispered into her hair. "She can't hurt anyone else." But as they stood there, holding each other in the aftermath of decades of violence and deception, Aurelia couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's death was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. The truth about the Blackthorne Empire's origins would send shockwaves through the business world, destroy countless careers built on corrupted foundations, and force both of them to rebuild their lives from the ground up. She looked out at the city sprawling below them, millions of people living their lives unaware that everything they thought they knew about one of America's most powerful families was about to change forever. The truth was finally free, but freedom, Aurelia was learning, came with its own price. 6 months after Victoria Blackthorne's suicide, the financial world was still reeling from the revelations that had emerged from the FBI investigation. The Blackthorn Industries empire had crumbled almost overnight, its stock price plummeting to worthless as investors fled and federal prosecutors seized assets tied to decades of criminal activity. But from the ashes of one family's corruption, something unexpected had begun to bloom. Aurelia stood in the lobby of the newly established Ravencrest Foundation headquarters, watching as construction workers put the finishing touches on the marble nameplate that would grace the entrance. The building had once housed a Blackthorn Industries subsidiary, but now it would serve a very different purpose, continuing the philanthropic work her grandfather had dreamed of completing 70 years ago. The hospital wing in Detroit is scheduled to break ground next month, said Marcus Chun, the foundation's newly appointed director of operations. He was a young lawyer who had volunteered his services after reading about the Ravencrest case in the news. And we've got 3 schools ready to open in underserved communities by fall. Aurelia nodded, still amazed by how quickly things had moved once the truth came out. The federal investigation had not only confirmed every detail in her mother's carefully preserved evidence, but had uncovered additional crimes spanning back decades. Assets worth over $8 billion had been frozen, then transferred back to the Ravencrest estate, making Aurelia one of the wealthiest women in America practically overnight. But it was the money she was giving away, not keeping, that filled her with the deepest sense of purpose. "Any word from Caspian?" Marcus asked gently. Aurelia's smile faltered slightly. "He's still in congressional hearings. The Justice Department wants his testimony about every aspect of his family's business operations. It could be weeks before he's finished." The aftermath of Victoria's exposure had been brutal for Caspian. Even though he'd had no knowledge of his family's crimes, even though he'd risked his life to help expose the truth, the court of public opinion had been less forgiving. His reputation was in ruins, his business relationships destroyed, his personal fortune tied up in legal proceedings that might take years to resolve. He'd insisted that Aurelia distance herself from him until the legal proceedings were complete, claiming he didn't want her foundation's important work to be tainted by association with the Blackthorn name. But she knew the real reason he was staying away. He was punishing himself for crimes he'd never committed, carrying guilt that belonged to previous generations. "Ms. Ravencrest?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." Aurelia's heart skipped, hoping against hope that Caspian had finally returned from Washington. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman in her 30s with short auburn hair and kind brown eyes. "Ms. Ravencrest, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I was Seraphina Blackthorn's roommate at Harvard." The name sent a chill through Aurelia. Even 6 months later, hearing about Caspian's murdered sister was like touching an open wound. "I'm sorry for your loss," Aurelia said carefully. "Seraphina seemed like an extraordinary person. She was, and she would have been so proud of what you're doing here." Sarah looked around the foundation lobby, her eyes taking in the photographs of planned hospitals and schools. "Actually, that's why I'm here. There's something I think you should know about Seraphina's last few months." They settled in Aurelia's office, Sarah declining offers of coffee or water as she pulled a thick folder from her briefcase. "Seraphina didn't just stumble across evidence of your family's murder," Sarah began. "She was actively looking for you." Aurelia's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "About a year before she died, Seraphina came across some old documents while helping Caspian clean out their father's office. Financial records that didn't make sense, property transfers that seemed suspicious. She started investigating, and she discovered the truth about what her grandfather had done to your family." Sarah opened the folder, revealing pages of handwritten notes in neat, precise handwriting. She spent months trying to track down what had happened to the surviving Ravencrests. She found records of your mother's name change, followed the trail to Oregon, even hired a private investigator to locate you and your grandmother. She knew where we were. She knew everything. Where you worked, where you went to school, your grandmother's medical condition. She was planning to approach you directly, to offer restitution for what her family had done. Sarah's voice grew soft with emotion. She wanted to give you back everything that had been stolen, even if it meant destroying her own family's legacy. Aurelia stared at the notes, seeing her own life documented in a stranger's careful handwriting. Seraphina had known about her financial struggles, her grandmother's illness, even her part-time job at the library. It was both touching and unsettling to realize she'd been watched over by someone she'd never met. "There's more," Sarah continued. Serafina had already drawn up legal documents transferring significant assets back to the Ravencrest estate. She was planning to present them to you the week she died. Victoria found out about her plans. I think so. The night before Serafina left for that weekend at the cabin, she called me. She was scared, said Victoria had been asking too many questions about her research. She'd hidden copies of all her evidence, but she was worried Victoria suspected what she was planning. Sarah reached into the folder again, pulling out a sealed envelope with Aurelia's name written on it in the same careful handwriting. She asked me to keep this safe, to find you if anything happened to her. I should have come forward sooner, but I was afraid. After the news broke about Victoria's suicide and everything that came out about your family, I knew it was time. Aurelia's hands shook as she opened the envelope, unfolding a letter that felt like receiving a message from beyond the grave. Dear Aurelia, it began. If you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and my worst fears about my family have been confirmed. I want you to know that not everyone who bears the Blackthorn name is a monster. Some of us still believe in justice, in making amends for the sins of our fathers. The letter went on to detail Serafina's discoveries, her plans for restitution, and her genuine remorse for what her family had done to the Ravencrests. But it was the final paragraph that brought tears to Aurelia's eyes. I know that my death will cause my brother tremendous pain, and I hate that my pursuit of justice might hurt the one person in my family who truly deserves happiness. Please, if you ever meet Caspian, help him understand that some fights are worth the cost. Help him remember that love is stronger than guilt, and that he deserves forgiveness for crimes he never committed. Take care of him for me. Serafina. Aurelia wiped tears from her cheeks, understanding now why Caspian was punishing himself so severely. He wasn't just carrying guilt about his family's crimes. He was carrying grief over his sister's death, believing that her pursuit of justice had led directly to her murder. Thank you for bringing this to me, she told Sarah. Caspian needs to see this. Where is he? I tried to reach him through his lawyers, but they said he wasn't taking personal meetings. Congressional hearings in Washington. But I think it's time I reminded him that he has a life worth living outside of those hearing rooms. 2 days later, Aurelia stood outside the Hart Senate office building in Washington, D.C., waiting for Caspian to emerge from another day of testimony. She'd been waiting for 3 hours, but she wasn't leaving without seeing him. Sarah had insisted on coming with her, determined to deliver Serafina's message personally. When Caspian finally appeared, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His usually perfect appearance was rumpled, his face drawn with exhaustion and stress. He stopped short when he saw Aurelia waiting by his car. You shouldn't be here, he said, but his eyes betrayed how much he'd missed her. Says who? The man who's been hiding in congressional hearings for 6 months instead of helping me rebuild the foundation his sister died trying to create? Caspian's face crumpled at the mention of Serafina. Everything I touch turns to poison, Aurelia. My family name, my reputation, my money, it's all tainted. You're doing incredible work with the foundation. Don't let association with me destroy that. The only thing that's going to destroy me is losing you because you're too stubborn to accept that you're not responsible for crimes committed before you were born. Sarah stepped forward, holding out Serafina's letter. She wanted you to have this. Caspian read the letter slowly, his hands shaking by the time he reached the end. When he looked up, tears were streaming down his face. She knew she was going to die, he whispered. She knew she was taking a risk, Aurelia corrected gently. But she also knew it was the right thing to do, and she wanted to make sure you knew that her choice wasn't your fault. I should have protected her. You couldn't protect her from something you didn't know was happening, but you can honor her memory by living the life she wanted you to have, by helping me continue the work she started. Caspian looked between Aurelia and Sarah, 2 women who had loved his sister in different ways but were united in their determination to see her final wishes fulfilled. The foundation doesn't need the baggage I bring, he said, but his resolve was weakening. The foundation needs someone who understands the cost of justice, who's willing to fight for what's right even when it's hard. Aurelia stepped closer, close enough to touch his face the way she had that first night 6 months ago. I need you, Caspian. Not your money, not your connections, not anything except you. The media will destroy you if we're together. They'll say you're sleeping with the enemy, profiting from association with the family that murdered yours. Let them talk. I know who you are, and that's all that matters. Caspian pulled her into his arms then, holding her like he'd been drowning and she was his lifeline. I've missed you so much it physically hurt. Then stop pushing me away and come home. 6 months later, Aurelia stood in the garden of the Ravencrest Foundation's first completed hospital, watching as Caspian cut the ribbon that would officially open the children's cancer ward. The crowd of reporters and donors applauded as he stepped back, his face glowing with the satisfaction of work that actually mattered. They'd been married for 3 months now, a small ceremony attended only by close friends and foundation staff. The media had been brutal at first, just as Caspian had predicted, but the couple's obvious devotion to charitable work and each other had gradually won over even the harshest critics. Caspian had used his remaining personal assets to fund a victim restitution program, tracking down other families who had been destroyed by Blackthorn Industries over the decades and providing them with financial support and legal assistance. It would take years to undo all the damage his family had caused, but they were committed to trying. Mrs. Blackthorn Ravencrest? A young reporter approached as the ceremony wound down. Any plans for children? The public is fascinated by the idea of the next generation bridging these two family legacies. Aurelia smiled, her hand moving instinctively to rest on her still flat stomach. She and Caspian had decided to wait a few more months before making their announcement, but she was already 12 weeks pregnant with the child who would carry both the Ravencrest and Blackthorn names into a future built on love rather than hatred. We're focused on our work right now, she said diplomatically, but we believe strongly in the power of new generations to heal old wounds. As the crowd dispersed and the sun set over the hospital that bore her grandfather's name, Aurelia felt the ghosts of the past finally beginning to rest. Her mother's sacrifice had not been in vain. Seraphina's death had not been meaningless, and the love she shared with Caspian had proven stronger than decades of family hatred and blood-soaked legacy. They walked hand in hand through the hospital corridors, past rooms where children would be healed rather than harmed, where the Ravencrest and Blackthorn names would finally be associated with hope rather than tragedy. Outside, the city lights sparkled like stars, and for the first time in either of their lives, the future looked brighter than the past. 5 years had passed since the truth about the Blackthorn-Ravencrest feud had shattered the business world, and the abandoned oil field in West Texas looked nothing like it had during Thomas Ravencrest's time. Where derricks had once pumped black gold from the earth, solar panels now gleamed in the desert sun, feeding clean energy into a grid that powered 3 states. Aurelia stood at the edge of the installation, watching her 3-year-old daughter Elena chase butterflies between the panels while 4-year-old Thomas, named for his great-great-grandfather, examined a lizard with the intense curiosity that seemed to define the next generation of their blended family. The irony isn't lost on me, Caspian said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind. My great-grandfather stole oil fields from your family, and now we're using those same fields to help save the planet. Seraphina would have loved this, Aurelia replied, leaning back against his chest. Clean energy, sustainable development, jobs for local communities. Everything she dreamed about when she was planning to return the Ravencrest assets. The Ravencrest Foundation had grown into one of the largest charitable organizations in North America, with hospitals, schools, and renewable energy projects spanning from Alaska to Mexico. But it was projects like this one, transforming sites of historical trauma into beacons of hope, that felt most meaningful to both of them. Mama, Papa, look what I found. Elena came running toward them, her small hands cupped carefully around something precious. She opened her palms to reveal a piece of old metal, tarnished green with age but still bearing the faint outline of what had once been the Ravencrest Company logo. It's from Grandpapa Thomas's time, Elena announced with the confidence of a child who had grown up hearing stories about her heritage. Before the bad people tried to take it away, Caspian knelt down to examine the artifact with the seriousness such discoveries deserved in their family. What do you think we should do with it? Keep it, Thomas declared, abandoning his lizard to join the discussion. So we remember the story. But not the angry parts, Elena added quickly. Just the parts about making things better. Aurelia smiled at her children's instinctive understanding of their complex legacy. They were growing up knowing both the darkness and light of their family history, but choosing to focus on redemption rather than revenge. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chun, now the Foundation's CEO. Congressional hearing went well. The renewable energy bill should pass next month. Your grandfather's vision of energy independence is about to become federal law. It had taken 5 years, but the Foundation's lobbying efforts were finally paying off. The same political connections that Richard Blackthorne had used for corruption were now being leveraged for environmental protection and social justice. Any regrets? Caspian asked as they watched their children play among the solar panels, their laughter echoing across the desert landscape. About marrying a reformed Blackthorne? About choosing love over vengeance? About having children who'll grow up knowing their family's money came from blood? Aurelia pretended to consider seriously. Not a single one. Even when the media calls us the most complicated love story in American business history? Especially then. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had transformed from her family's enemy into her life's greatest ally. We proved that people can choose to be better than their history. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Aurelia of the oil fires that had once lit these fields. But there was no smoke now, no poison seeping into the groundwater, no workers risking their lives for another family's greed. Time to go home, Caspian called to the children, who protested with the universal childhood belief that adventures should never end. As they loaded into the electric vehicle that would take them back to the small town where they maintained a modest home during these site visits, Elena climbed into Aurelia's lap. "Mama, will you tell us the story again? About how you and Papa fixed the broken parts. Which parts do you want to hear?" "All of it. But start with the part where you were brave enough to trust each other." Aurelia looked at Caspian in the rearview mirror, seeing the same wonder in his eyes that she felt every day when she contemplated the family they'd built from the ashes of generational hatred. "Once upon a time," she began, "there were two families who forgot that love was stronger than anger and forgiveness more powerful than revenge. But then a very brave woman and a very sorry man decided to remember what their hearts had always known." As their car disappeared into the desert twilight, heading home to a future neither of their ancestors could have imagined, the solar panels continued their silent work of transforming sunlight into energy, turning the sight of old wounds into a source of new power. Behind them, the piece of metal Elena had found caught the last rays of sunlight, the Raven Crest logo gleaming like a promise that some legacies are worth reclaiming, and some love stories are worth the fight to tell them.